Did you receive the luggage from my parents and sister? From now on, we'll be supporting them." Over the phone, Robert declared this as if it was no big deal. As usual, it seems that Robert was prioritizing his own interests. It appears that I was merely seen as a convenient source of financial benefit. That's when I decided to cut ties with Robert and his family. Until now, I had swallowed my bitterness out of love for him, but this situation has changed my feelings. The handover is complete. I just sent my luggage to my new residence in the high-rise apartment. I responded cheerily to Robert. "A high-rise apartment," Robert muttered, then lost his words for a moment. "I am Sherry Irving. At 55, I work for a real estate company. Real estate sales is a daily battle. Especially in the beginning, I faced countless challenges, starting with acquiring new clients. Being in a regional branch, I had to find new clients interested in stocks. Despite visiting many homes, I often faced rejection. Sometimes, I was met with harsh words, leading to disappointment. But by persistently continuing my sales efforts, I gradually increased my clientele. Currently, I live with my husband, Robert. We met in college and later on got married. Of course, Robert was the one who proposed. Our only son, Max, is now an adult and employed. Due to his job, he currently lives a few hours away by train, which makes me feel a bit lonely. However, when he has long vacations, he comes home, and I eagerly await those times. My in-laws live relatively close, so it's a short distance from our place. There, my in-laws and my sister-in-law, a total of 3 people reside. My sister-in-law, 5 years my senior, is an avid Idol fan. She travels for concerts from New York in the east to LA in the west. She stays at home to secure funds for this purpose. Due to her strong attachment to idols, she has no intention of marrying. Their home, a 40-year-old 2-room rental apartment, shows signs of aging everywhere. And since it's located on the 4th floor without an elevator, stair climbing becomes a significant effort. However, Robert often says, "I'm going to visit my parents," suggesting he has a good relationship with my in-laws. I've lost my parents and don't have the opportunity to do so, so I don't oppose his visits. My relationship with my in-laws is a separate matter. They are still healthy, and my sister-in-law is there, so I wasn't particularly worried. That's when I, optimistically unprepared, faced an unexpected situation. As soon as Robert returned home, he approached me, seemingly eager to say something. It seems the apartment where my parents live is going to be demolished. They've been asked to vacate. I was surprised by the sudden news. "So sudden? What will we do now?" I asked urgently, but Robert calmly replied, "Well, it'll work out somehow. There are 3 adults after all. But can you hurry up with dinner?" With that, Robert went to his room to change. I was flustered. If my in-laws turned to us for help, it would be a big problem. They have always been cold towards me. This was clear from the first time we met 30 years ago, when Robert and I started dating and visited his parents' home. "Nice to meet you. I look forward to getting to know you." I greeted them with a smile under the watchful eyes of my in-laws. But his parents and sister just stared at me. I was confused about how to respond. In the midst of this, my mother-in-law sighed heavily and said, "I heard Robert had a girlfriend, but she's nothing like I imagined. She has no charm and looks boa." What? I couldn't hide my confusion at my mother-in-law's sudden remark. Unable to counter, my sister-in-law joined in. "She really looks plain and poor. Not quite right to be Robert's wife." Exactly. I looked to Robert for support, but my hopes were quickly dashed. "I've dated glamorous beauties before, but I think someone like her will meet my needs better." Robert said this with a smile. "Really, Sherry, you don't seem popular, right? It looks like you'd do anything Robert asks, so he won't leave you." My sister-in-law nodded and responded, "I should have ended things with Robert then. But back then, I was deeply in love with him and couldn't see the reality before my eyes. I misunderstood Robert's terrible behavior as an attempt to make his family accept me. As a result, we got married, and that's when our troubles began. After a while, my mother-in-law started giving orders. "Hey, the microwave is acting up. Go buy a new one," she would suddenly demand over the phone. Not knowing what to do, I rushed to an electronics store. I bought the microwave my mother-in-law specified and delivered it to their house. But there was no word of thanks. "The microwave has arrived, so your job here is done. Go back home." My mother-in-law dismissed me with those words. Naturally, I was not reimbursed for the microwave. Afterward, she continued to issue various commands. If I ignored her orders, she would surely report it to Robert. And in turn, Robert would raise his voice at me. "You're part of this family, right? Show some respect and don't spare on the expenses." This type of interaction repeated itself, and I reluctantly endured. My sister-in-law also had similar demands. "I'm going to my favorite's concert. Book a train for me," she would suddenly call. And the requested dates were always last minute. Naturally, it was often hard to find available seats on the train. When I reported the situation, my sister-in-law would immediately become furious. "How can you be so incompetent? Unbelievable. I'll have to go the day before the concert then, but find a hotel. Since it's your fault this time, you're paying." She would dump her dissatisfaction on me and hang up unilaterally. Eventually, I had to pay for my sister-in-law's travel and accommodation expenses from my salary. My father-in-law was entirely under the thumb of my mother and sister-in-law. "They're right. Your opinion is wrong. And by the way, we're out of liquor. Go buy some." This was his regular phrase. The unreasonable demands from my in-laws gradually wore me down. And the problem wasn't just with my in-laws. Robert himself was a significant issue. One Monday night, when I returned home, Robert was sitting on the sofa in the living room. The room was dim and no lights were on. Feeling something was off, I asked Robert, "What happened?" Without making eye contact, he replied, "I quit my job today. I got into an argument with my boss and submitted my resignation." "Really?" From what I heard, the resignation was accepted on the spot. Normally, at least a 1-month notice period was required for resignation. However, it seems that Robert's resignation was accepted immediately. Even after hearing this, my doubts didn't clear. "What are you planning to do now? How will we manage the living expenses? Do you have any prospects for a new job?" I bombarded him with questions. Then Robert answered indifferently, "I'll start looking for a job tomorrow. For the time being, can you support us financially?" I tried to counter his illogical statement, but Robert glared at me and snapped, "By marrying me, you were freed from your lonely single life. Can't you be useful at times like this?" Robert was sitting in front of the TV, looking displeased. When he gets like this, he never accepts anyone else's opinion. Sometimes he even lashes out at objects. There was a time he damaged the refrigerator. It's very inconvenient when things get broken. Reluctantly, I had no choice but to reply, "Okay." Since then, Robert has yet to find re-employment. He occasionally leaves the house, but it's unclear if he's actually job hunting. And since Robert stopped contributing financially, I've been forced to economize, including cutting back on food expenses. Despite this, Robert has a big appetite and claims to be a gourmet. When I serve affordable meals, he complains and consumes everything, including my portion. "Are you treating me like this because I have no income? Serve dishes with more meat. Don't you feel sorry for me having such a stingy wife?" Though I wanted to argue back, I couldn't speak up because I still had feelings for Robert. "I'm sorry," I apologized, while feeling utterly exhausted inside. On that day, the doorbell rang, and I stepped outside. Yes, 2 men, ready to bring in packages, stood before me. "This is the residence of Mr. Irving, right? We have some packages to deliver here." They informed me and started to bring the packages into the house. "Could you please wait a moment? Are you sure there's no mistake?" I hurriedly stopped them. With puzzled looks, they answered, "We got clear instructions from the homeowner, Mr. Robert Irving. It's difficult for us to proceed if you obstruct us." They began to bring in one box after another. I couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. I immediately called Robert. Fortunately, he answered the phone right away. Robert, movers are bringing in loads of boxes right now. What's all this stuff? Robert's response was unexpected. Did you receive the luggage from my parents and sister? From now on, we'll be supporting them. Over the phone, Robert declared this as if it was no big deal. What do you mean by that? They're being kicked out of their apartment. We have space here, so I suggested they move in with us. Plus, I'll get a share of Dad's pension, so it'll be like pocket money for me. As usual, it seems that Robert was prioritizing his own interests. The fact that he regarded the money received as mere pocket money was astonishing. Living with my in-laws will undoubtedly add further strain to our finances. Yet, there was no sign that Robert intended to contribute to this household. It appears that I was merely seen as a convenient source of financial benefit. That's when I decided to cut ties with Robert and his family. Until now, I had swallowed my bitterness out of love for him, but this situation has changed my feelings. At the moment I solidified my decision, Robert continued. So, how long will it take to unpack? He asked as if it were nothing out of the ordinary. How? I couldn't hide my surprise, but Robert seemed oblivious. He continued as if it were a matter of course. It's about the unpacking. Mom and Sis are getting old, so they can't handle the hard work, right? You'll take care of the unpacking while we stay at a hotel. I felt anger at Robert's suggestion that I handle all my in-laws' belongings alone. He should regret this. After some thought, I replied, I think it will take about a week. Robert's voice suddenly revealed his dissatisfaction. A week? Isn't that clearly too much time? You're really inefficient. I'll convince Mom and the others, so make sure everything is sorted within a week. I'll send the transfer form for the moving expenses later. Don't forget to receive it. With that, he ended the call. His attitude in asking for favors was truly infuriating. I'll make him realize soon, I muttered quietly, and after a week passed, I received a call from Robert. Is all the unpacking done? Mom and the others will be back soon. Do you have the payment slip for the moving expenses? Robert was talking cheerily for some reason. I could hear the voices of my in-laws in the background. Now we have a handy house helper nearby. You'll follow our instructions, right? There's no salary, but we're family, so that's fine. Mom, I think that's a bit direct. But she's not really family, so being a house helper might be just right for her. My sister-in-law said, laughing, because she's a fake family member. My father-in-law agreed. These people were not my family. They were just strangers from the start. So I responded with a smile. The handover is complete. I just sent my luggage to my new residence in the high-rise apartment. I responded cheerily to Robert. A high-rise apartment. Robert muttered, then lost his words for a moment. In fact, right after I got the call from Robert a week ago, I took action immediately. First, I explained everything to Max. Max was quite furious and decided to stand by me. And there was something Robert didn't know. I had actually bought a room in a high-rise apartment for investment purposes. The real estate company I work for deals with investment apartments for high-income earners. In my second year of working, I took out a long-term mortgage and acquired a room in a high-rise apartment. The room has one bedroom and is not very spacious. And since it was on the third floor, it was relatively affordable in that building. Still, purchasing the apartment was a major decision. I am proud that I made a brave choice. After buying the room, I quickly put it up for rent, and until now, the rental income had been covering the mortgage repayment successfully. However, the previous tenant had just moved out, and the income had stopped. So, I decided it was the perfect opportunity to move. After I calmly explained the situation, Robert asked a question. Why will you be the only one living in a high-rise apartment? That's unfair. What's going to happen to the place we used to live? Urgency laced Robert's voice. I knew why he was anxious. After all, the place we lived in together was a rental, and unemployed Robert had no means to pay the rent. Moreover, my in-laws were living on their pensions. Compared to a rental apartment, the rent for the house we used to live in was significantly higher. Plus, my sister-in-law spent all her earnings on chasing idols and probably had little savings. I pretended to know nothing and answered, "If the whole family lives here, there shouldn't be any problem. The lease is in Robert's name, so there's no need for any changes, and there shouldn't be any issues, right? Well, you are currently jobless, but I'm sure you'll find something soon, so no worries." Despite my cheerful response, I could sense the disturbance on the other end of the phone. "Wait, this house isn't our property? The rent seems to be quite a lot. How much is it per month?" My mother-in-law was clearly anxious. "I've spent it all on idols, so I can't pay any rent." "And what do you mean Robert is jobless? How have you been managing the living expenses then? The pension I receive isn't nearly enough to pay rent for such a big place." My father-in-law was also confused. My in-laws and sister-in-law united in throwing accusations at Robert. They must have reached their breaking point. Finally, Robert exploded and yelled at me. "Why are you deciding everything on your own? Get ready because we're getting a divorce." I responded calmly, "I don't mind getting a divorce. In fact, I'm already consulting with a lawyer. You should be receiving the notification soon." I answered with a calm smile. "What?" Robert exclaimed in astonishment. "Are you really okay with that? If you divorce Robert, you'll be all alone. You'll have a lonely old age." My sister-in-law also pressed me similarly. It seems my determination got through to them. Feeling at a disadvantage, my mother-in-law said to me, "There's no need to divorce. We are one family. As long as you comply, like before, there won't be any problems." My father-in-law joined in. "Don't be stubborn, come back home." I despised how they changed their tune when their position worsened. They needed me, and without me, they would struggle to live. As these thoughts went through my mind, Robert said, "Our family is very generous. Be grateful, apologize, and come back." My in-laws and sister-in-law agreed, especially my sister-in-law, who inappropriately said, "I'll live in the high-rise apartment instead, so vacate that room quickly." I had no intention of returning, so I made it clear. I absolutely refuse. Robert and the others are just after my assets and free labor. It's impossible for me to return to such an environment. Criticism came flying from them, getting all high and mighty just because I'm silent. "Don't say whatever you want. What will happen to Max if we actually get a divorce? Won't his chances of getting married decrease if he's from a broken home?" Robert said gleefully. He loved Max. He was his beloved son. My mother-in-law also loved Max very much. "Let's live together when Max comes back. Ignore this person," she said cheerfully. My father and sister-in-law seemed happy too. I hope their expectations shatter into pieces. I've told Max everything, so he's on my side now. He looks down on you, Robert, and might not want to see you again. I spoke cheerfully. Robert, surprised, said, "I thought Max loved me," in a disappointed tone. Since Robert used to say that Max was the apple of his eye, this situation must be particularly hard to accept. My mother-in-law muttered, "Max," while seeming to tear up. My sister and father-in-law were silent, unable to say anything. At that moment, Robert suddenly remembered. "By the way, did you make sure to pay for the moving expenses?" My mother-in-law also recalled, "Yes, that's true. Why would they think that the oppressed party should pay for the moving expenses? Especially when divorce was being discussed." So I calmly replied, "I haven't paid. It was supposed to be several $1,000s, right? How do you plan to come up with such a large amount?" Robert's voice was trembling. "I thought you were going to cover those costs. I have no money and can't possibly pay. Just take care of the moving expenses somehow." My mother and sister-in-law were in a panic. "What are you planning to do, Robert? We don't have any money. We just bought new furniture, too. I bought my idol merchandise on credit thinking I would live in a spacious room. I intended to have Sherry cover the costs." My sister-in-law exclaimed in a voice of despair. After that, Robert and my in-laws continued to shift blame onto each other. Continuing this conversation wouldn't lead to anything productive. "Please communicate through the lawyer from now on." I stated this and ended the call. Then, I quietly blocked the numbers of Robert and my in-laws. Subsequently, Robert and I went through with the divorce, but it was a contentious process. I think Robert hoped to cancel the divorce and continue receiving financial support since he was jobless, including for the moving expenses. However, his plan fell apart when his beloved son, Max, began to look down on him. During the consultations at the law firm, Max, who stayed with me for a while, declared to Robert and the others, "My family is now only my mother. I cannot call people who cause her pain, like my father and grandparents, my family. After the divorce, I will be with my mother." Max resolutely rejected Robert and my in-laws. This confused Robert and my mother-in-law. They turned to me, saying, "Can't you persuade Max? You started the problem and involved the family. Aren't you aware of the trouble you're causing?" I declared firmly, "What are you trying to say? Should I endure like before, playing the role of a maid? You don't work and don't lift a finger at home, and you plan to let your parents and sister live with us, pressuring me? I won't return to that place." Perhaps my voice was too loud, as Robert and my in-laws were taken aback. Calmly, I continued, "My family is only Max. You and the others are now strangers. I will not be involved or support you financially anymore." Robert and my in-laws looked displeased. With my firm decision and the lawyer's persuasion, the divorce was finalized. However, Robert still contacted me through the lawyer several times afterward. "I can't find a job and might be evicted. I covered the moving expenses with a loan, but the interest is piling up. It's the end if this continues. Please, can we start over? I'll even kneel if necessary." The lawyer said that not only Robert but also my in-laws were desperately reaching out. "Please help. We need financial support. Robert doesn't work and just watches TV all day. I'm too weak to manage the housework properly. Can you at least take care of me? The rent and daily expenses are overwhelming, and it's difficult to pay." My sister-in-law also pleaded, "It's unfair that only you live comfortably in the high-rise apartment while I'm left behind. Let me live there too." Even after the divorce, they seemed to expect me to comply just because I was the ex-wife. I politely refused their requests through the lawyer. If this continues, Robert and my in-laws will only limit their own paths. I continue to live in the high-rise apartment. What has changed is the frequency of my conversations. After separating from Robert, Max and I have been talking more. In fact, Max has a girlfriend, and they plan to visit me soon. The possibility of our family growing excites me. I am filled with happiness while searching the internet for a restaurant that Max and his girlfriend would enjoy.